Hello, my name is Rebecca. I am an astrologer in Houston, Texas, and I specialize in relationships. I am the author of the Astrological Seventh House Workbook, and it is based on Carl Jung's theory of the shadow and seventh house astrology, which is the marriage house. And I wanted to talk a little bit about where the worldview that astrology came from. And because most people who read the daily sun sign columns or, pick up a magazine and see, Libras are like this, Aries are like that, etc., have no idea just how complicated astrology actually is or what it is really based on. So when you first begin to study astrology, it seems as if the planets are doing something to us because it's so accurate, and that we are behaving certain ways because of the planetary influence. Well, although there is tremendous accuracy on the character descriptions in astrology, it's really a misconception. And until you really study it for a very long time, you don't really realize where the worldview it actually came from, how it works, or how we believe it works, because nobody can prove it. But until you study it for years, you don't realize that rather than being about planets out there doing something to us, this is about actually based on an ancient worldview that we are connected to the cosmos. And the ancients postulated that there were signatures and correspondences between higher and lower orders of life. So the ancients believed that the universe was alive. And everything and everyone in the cosmos is part of one unified organism, which is completely different from thinking the planets are out there doing something to us. It's like we're connected to the cosmos. And whether we know how or why it works, it works. It's amazing. And we're each born at a particular place and time, and who we are is reflective of that moment in time. And the interesting thing is that it can be described by a planetary influence can express itself on a bodily level, as an external event, as an inner emotional or spiritual state, as an ideology, as another person with whom we engage in relationship, or any combination of all of these things. And so inner and outer are reflecting each other. And who we are is energy. I mean, everything is energy, and the energy present at that moment in time is who we are. And all of these are archetypes, what Jung called archetypes. And just like we all have the same body parts, we all have the same archetypes. But some of us have a stronger combination of one or another. So we will be more like 2 or 3 different signs, or even a lot of different things, depending on where the planets fall in the houses and the aspects that it's making, etc. So it's almost as if the archetypal forces that are operating within us are being expressed in our outer world at the same time. And realms of substance, which is matter, and realms of psyche are insoluble. They are a psychoid, what Jung called a psychoid reality. So inner and outer reflecting each other was something that was written on an alchemical book called the Emerald Tablet, which the Emerald Tablet was like the Bible to that time, which is the Renaissance, when the alchemists were also astrologers, and you couldn't be an alchemist if you weren't an astrologer. So this was called the Hermetic worldview. And people who understand astrology are usually well-versed in understanding this Hermetic principle that what's inside is outside, as above, so below, as within, so without, so that the miracle of the one can be established. And that was supposedly written by Hermes Trismegistus, who was an alchemist. And he described that, and Jung called it synchronicity. how things that are inside have a parallel meaning outside, although they're not causal. It's not cause and effect, it's acausal. And Jung believed that we were all connected through this rhizome underneath, which he called the collective unconscious, that came to him in a dream, where he understood that we were all connected through the collective unconscious. Inner and outer states or events will parallel each other and have the same meaning. And that's how astrology actually works. So it is not cause and effect. The planets are doing nothing to us. It's acausal. And in this book, which is called The Dynamics of the Unconscious, she writes about how, and I'm gonna read it because it's really well put, how she explains the principles of the planets. So the principle of Mars, for example, is not only a planet, it is also found in the earth as iron, in the human body as the adrenal glands, in the psyche as the aggressive instinct, and so on. Saturn is not only a planet, but it's also lead in the earth and the human skeletal system and the impulse for self-protection. And the sun can be found not only in the heavens, but as gold in the earth, and as the human heart, and as the capacity to love. So this vision of a unified cosmos with interconnections via a finite number of archetypal lines was fundamental both to alchemy and to astrology. So the two were never separate. The metals upon which the alchemists worked were not only actual substances subjected to cooking processes, but they were also seen to be the planets themselves and the great cosmic principles behind them. So if you were transmuting lead, you were transmuting Saturn, and in turn working on the defensive, dark, depressive, and barren aspects of nature and of yourself in order to release the solar gold of a loving heart and a joyful vision of life. So all the imperfections that we are born with, because there's no one who has a perfect chart. So all the different things that are in our chart that are out of balance, that we might have too much of one element, we might have not enough of a certain modality. Each thing in the chart that describes us, there's going to be challenging situations. And those challenging situations are the ones that we will see right away from the moment of birth. So it is remarkable how from the moment of birth, this is manifesting in our environment. And we will make decisions based on that moment of time of birth and based on our environment and our family of origin and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So when you really look at your birth chart and you see that it is like a very accurate symbolic system of your psyche, you can't deny who you are. I mean, I remember when I first started studying it, and my ex-husband, who is now deceased, he would make fun of me and he would complain, like, why are you wasting so much money? Why are you wasting so much time doing this? And he could not, with his scientific or conservative worldview, could not even imagine that we were connected to the cosmos. And then later on, when I ordered a psychological horoscope analysis report, I sell these, they're amazing. I ordered one for him and he didn't even know what time he was born, but I lived with him for 7 years. So I knew. His mother said that the farmers were coming in from the fields at lunch to eat because he lived on a farm. And so I ordered him a report and he read it, and it is him. You can't, when you really look at your birth chart and you see a description of it, or you go to a good astrologer, you cannot deny that this is who you are. So a lot will be revealed to you by studying your own birth chart. And our chart is a map of our soul. So I believe that soul work is what astrology, combined with Jungian psychology, which is analytical psychology, that's what soul work is about. Because everything is energy and we are energy. And these imprints from our birth are our archetypes. It is our archetypal structure that we are fated to have, because that's who we came here to be. as part of the cosmos evolution. And I really believe that as well, that we are part of the evolution of the cosmos. And so it is not just random things that happen to us. Everything that happens to us and that we choose to become conscious about will help evolve the whole planet. So Carl Jung said that's what we're doing on this planet, is truly becoming conscious. And all you have to do to prove it to yourself is study it. Study your chart, study the people who are close to you that you know, that you have spent enough quality time with to say, yes, this is about you. You know, yes, this is something that I can see in you. So it's almost like it's a detailed symbolic system, and this profound accuracy is a sacred language. To me, it's a sacred language. And especially when we learn about our own, we know we are connected to the cosmos. We know without a doubt that we are connected to our source. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about knowing your astrology. And so there are two things that for every one of us that are really important to find out. And I may have said this before in another video, but I'm going to say it again because it is so important. There are two centers to our psyche, conscious and unconscious. So the biggest hurdle of all is realizing this. And it is also a big hurdle when we're trying to explain it to another person, because unless they have experienced this and shown themselves, read something about themselves, it's kind of hard for them to believe it. They just think what's in the sun sign column. Oh, Libras are going to have a bad day today. Well, how can that be 12 times 12 people, 12 times everybody? Well, no, it's way more complex than that. I mean, it is profound. And these books, they're called ephemerides. We know from these books where the planets are 250 years from now to the minute. And these ephemerides will tell you the day, on that day, this is where the planets will be. That is how mathematical this is. So if you really want to understand it, you can actually prove it to yourself. So many things happen from the moment of childhood. And this is what happens the moment of birth, that our immediate family, our immediate environment, again, it's going to be reflected by our birth chart. And many things that happen to us are repressed or suppressed. There are things that we don't really know that happen to us. So the ages between 1 and 5 are of primary importance. And all the decisions that we made during that time are based on survival and our instincts. So these are, at that time, we are not thinking, oh, well, this is happening to me and my parents are behaving a certain way or whatever. No, this is based on survival and our instinct. And our instinct is to survive, to get through wherever we are. And so a lot of decisions are rooted in this childhood beginning. And they're based, again, on our survival instincts. So once we learn about something that is repeating, like if something's repeating in our life and we learn about it and we think to ourselves, okay, like now I know it, I'm not going to do it again. Well, we have to convince our unconscious that we're not going to do it again, because our unconscious has a totally different agenda. And that's why we will have patterns that repeat over and over and over. So you can go read a self-help book or 100 self-help books, and you can study philosophy and psychology and have healing things happen to you, et cetera, et cetera. And then years later, you're repeating a pattern and you go, why is this happening to me again? Well, that's why it is so important to learn about our own unconscious. Our unconscious is making decisions that are driving our behaviors, our attitudes, our reactions to people and circumstances in our environment. And these are things we don't know about. So ask yourself, why are these patterns happening to me over and over? And why do certain circumstances and people repeat? What is it in me that's driving me? And what is it even my own attitude is creating these things without my knowledge. So to accept that there are unconscious people inside of us that we don't know about is huge. I remember when I first learned about it, I was like 36 years old or 35 years old. And I was reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections by Carl Jung, which is his autobiography. And it's like this thick and it's really deep and very, very good. And he was saying that there are people inside us that we don't know. And it just hit me like a bolt, like a lightning bolt, because what came up for me is that's why I said what I said yesterday. And I didn't understand, why did I say that? Who in me said that? I didn't mean that. So we will have like slips of the tongue, or we will have things come out of us that we don't know where that came from. Well, these are the archetypes that are inside of us that can be in conflict with our ideas and beliefs about who we are. So astrology is such a gift because you can really look at the blueprint of your psyche. You can even see by the squares and oppositions and some of the planetary conjunctions or placements, you can see where you have conflict, how one part of you wants one thing and another part of you wants something else, or where you're lopsided. Where you're lopsided, like you may not have a lot of earth in your chart, and therefore you are extremely impractical or irresponsible. And you keep doing it over and over, even though you tell yourself, I need to be more responsible, I need to be more practical. And it just keeps occurring, things just keep occurring, and you end up again with, a lot of bills and no money and, concerns about money. Why would this repeat? Because it's inside of you. And so everything is going to be like an infinity circle. What's inside is outside. So until we really understand ourselves on a very deep level, these things are going to repeat. So the planets and the signs that the planets are in, the squares, the oppositions, etc., will tell you a lot about yourself. And this is the way the unconscious speaks to us, is by projecting itself, by projecting it onto events, by projecting itself onto people and situations in our life. That's how the unconscious will get to us, because we can't see the unconscious and we don't know what's unconscious. So the unconscious is doing all of this. And what Carl Jung said, he called it the self, that the self was the organizing principle in the psyche. The self is striving for wholeness, and wholeness is balance, to be able to balance something where we are out of balance. So the more we refuse to see, the more painful it gets. So pain and suffering and things that repeat for us that are very hurtful, they're purposeful. There's meaning to it. And the more we can open ourselves up to the fact that we don't know everything about ourselves, the more we can choose our behavior, the more we can respond in a different way, and the more we can write our own story. So life is kind of unfair. The first 30 years of our life, for sure, the first 30 years until our first Saturn return, is pretty fated. We're fated into that family. We're fated into that timing or that world situation, wherever the world was at that moment in time. It's our fate, but we are not fated for the rest of our life if we become conscious. And that's why Carl Jung said, the most important thing we're doing on this planet is becoming conscious. And it is a long, difficult process. Nobody does it overnight. And learning about these things will help you, but it doesn't mean you're done. Nobody's done. If you're still on the planet, you're not done yet. And my teacher said that he possibly thinks that we're not really done until we die. And so that death is also an important part of our process and our evolution. So whatever we don't know, we will project, we will disown, we will deny. And we will see other people as doing these things, or other people, and this is how other people actually can help us, how we can all help each other. by looking at these things. So when we fall in love with someone, we are not the one choosing the person that we fall in love with. It is the unconscious that chooses that person. And it will be like a fascination. And I want to read a quote by Carl Jung that's in my book because it's excellent. I have a poster of it in my office. A fascination of this kind is never exercised by one person upon another. It is always a phenomenon of relationships, which requires two people, insofar as the person fascinated necessarily has a corresponding disposition. But the disposition must be unconscious, or no fascination will take place. The fascination is a compulsive phenomenon in the sense that it lacks a conscious motive. It is not a process of our will, but something that rises up from the unconscious and forcibly obtrudes itself upon the conscious mind. Just as with the shadow, this fascination can also be experienced as repulsion. So our shadow can be projected onto somebody where we put a halo effect on them and we can see nothing wrong with them. We over idealize them. And that too is a defense mechanism when we over idealize anyone, because we don't really know them. And even if we spend hours and hours on the phone and we spend all this, we think, quality time with them for a year or two, until you live with somebody, until you marry them, you don't know them. And that's when the projections will fall off, and they have to, so you can differentiate from each other, so you can see who each other actually is. And you know, when we're in love, we feel compulsive and compelled. And even when sometimes we know this isn't good for me, this isn't good, this person is not good for me, and everybody else will tell you this person isn't treating you right, you will still want to make that happen. And so my teacher Pittman said it's kind of like trying to take the keys away from a drunk. When a person says, I know this is the right person for me, and they're so madly in love, they'll just keep going like a loose cannon towards that situation. And then sometimes both people fall in love at the same time, and so they're both idealizing each other. Well, I wrote an article, it's on my website, and it's called, Is It Love or Is It Projection? I highly recommend y'all read that. It's been translated into several languages, actually. So my teacher Pittman says, I alone must become myself, but I cannot become myself alone. So the unconscious projects itself out so that we can know ourselves. And like I said, if it's unconscious and it's not a healthy relationship, in my book, I described this guy and his story that he told me when he came for a consultation. And he was so in love with this girl. And he said it was like being a monkey with your hand caught in a glass jar trying to get a banana out, and your hand is stuck and you can't get it out. And you can't get the banana and you can't get it out. You're just stuck. And so sometimes we feel like that. You know, I can look back on my life when I was very stuck, when I was over idealizing people and thought they were perfect and nobody could talk me out of it. And eventually, of course, the relationship deteriorated or it proceeded. And so it's not that it's all negative. And I want to say that too. You can be projecting the best things about you onto the other person and say, oh my God, they are so kind. They are so wonderful. They are so altruistic and giving to other people. You can see put a halo on them when you see your best side on another person. So that is also shadow projection. And when I'm teaching, I like to say, have you ever fallen madly in love? Or have you ever met anyone you can't stand? Well, say hello to your shadow, because that is our shadow self that we are putting on another person. And he also called the male and female inside of us the anima and animus, which is the contrasexual images that are in our psyche. So when I hear people complaining, most of the time when I do a consultation, people are complaining, my husband this, or my wife that, or my boss this, or my friend that. and they don't understand the situation. And if I take their birth chart and sit down and look at it, I can actually see in the chart what is being projected and can facilitate them into becoming more conscious and more aware of the meaning of that, what that is internally that is being disowned, or that is completely shut off from them, that they are not willing to see or be, or that they're doing all over the place and they don't even know they're doing it. I mean, this is amazing to me when people are doing something all over, but they're in total denial that they do it. And so this usually happens with our instincts, like anger, for instance, where somebody is like real angry all the time, but they deny it. And yet, their husband's acting it out for them. And then you see it and they're like that too, but they don't see it. Or they let the other person be the bad guy, like ask your father, when the person doesn't want to be the hard one in the parent children relationship, well, he put it on your father. Go ask your father and make him the bad guy and make him be the disciplinarian instead of going ahead and saying you can't do this or that. So often we don't want to be known as anything but good. And this can happen in our families where we will see a parent and one of them is the good one and one of them is what we would consider the bad one, or they're very polarized. They're two extremes. The second chapter of my book is called Our Parents, Our Partners, and Our Seventh House, because we marry our parents and their situation will uncannily repeat in our own relationships. And it takes a while to see that. It really actually takes a while to see that. So you really have to almost go through several experiences before you can reflect on the experiences and reflect on the patterns. Jung says, whatever one does not live, lives against one. So that means that anything we're completely disowning or denying is almost like as if we're asking the universe, we're asking for it. We're asking the universe to bring us that so we can see it. And again, it all starts with our parents. And so looking at our mother and father and our self and other in a birth chart is so valuable. If our parents criticized us, if they neglected us, betrayed us, didn't find time for us, didn't listen to us, pointed out all our mistakes, whatever, we will marry someone or we will find a boss or a friend to do the same. We will, because we are trying to repair that unresolved issue with our primary relationships, which is our parents. And it's the unconscious that's choosing this person that we're with or that became our boss. I mean, one girl came to my shadow workshops and she said, this is the third boss I've had like this. And she had some pretty high paying jobs. So this was going to be the third very high paying job she was going to leave because her boss was a certain way. And she could not see that in herself. Well, after she took my shadow workshop, because back then I taught workshops at a community center, and that's how I was able to write my book. I transcribed a lot of these workshops. So in my book, there's a lot of examples of how to do that. But the unconscious is the one choosing the person we're with. So we can heal that primary relationship. And you can be in a room with 500 people and only one person is attractive. You find yourself being attracted to the same kind of person over and over. Sometimes they even look alike. I had a guy friend that married 2 women in a row. They actually looked like twins, first wife and second wife. And then I know a girl who who's married to this guy, and he passed away. And I was at the wedding when they were getting married, when they were actually, not when they got married, but when they actually were at the funeral, and the ex-wife was there and so was my friend. And I asked his ex-wife for his birth information, and I went home and looked it up, and their energy was identical. I mean, it was identical. So that was really interesting to me too, is that the unconscious is the one that is choosing all these situations because it wants to be known. Another interesting thing that happens is that we'll do one side and then we'll do the other side. We'll be the one who's moody and selfish and too extravagant or irresponsible, and our partner will be complaining about us. So nobody's innocent and nobody's perfect. Perfection does not exist. So those are things about us we don't identify with and we don't know. And again, people will say to me, well, I don't want to look at that. You're telling me to see that something I find intolerable in another person is about myself. I don't see that. I don't see that about myself. And unless we can see that, we can't change it. So we can't change anything unless we can see it. So that is the most valuable part of being willing to look at it. And then just because we can now see that this is actually a part of us, we can remember and choose to behave in a different way. We can't change anything about our behavior if we're into denial about it. If we do not see it and we refuse to acknowledge that we have anything to do with these repeating patterns. So most of our relationship choices are going to be shaped or chosen by our unconscious and what is repressed within us. And that's the scary part, is that it's repressed and we don't know about it. And I love this quote by Edna St. Vincent Millay. She says, life is not one damn thing after another. It's the same damn thing over and over. So whenever we're unwilling to acknowledge and then create a balance for ourselves, because usually whatever it is, we're lopsided, we're out of balance. So with an understanding of our shadows, if we don't have an understanding of our shadows, then we are going to attract people to us to show us our own unlived life. And again, early on, our early life experiences, anything that happened to us that we don't know, that was at the very beginning, it functions outside of our conscious awareness. I mean, even if it looks like it's all their fault, it actually is something that's in us, or it wouldn't be happening outside of us. So when we're looking for the perfect parent out there, it's unconscious. It's unconscious that we fall in love with people that are like our parents because we want to make them be what we wanted them to be. Well, it's not going to happen. So our parents are let off the hook and we're let off the hook if we have children of our own, because we're not perfect parents either. Perfection does not exist. Imperfection is the main gateway to the unconscious. It is not by looking for the light. It's about making what's dark or hidden conscious and bringing it up to the light. So the alchemists knew that. They knew that whatever they brought up to the light, that they could transform and that they could implement in their life in a different way. But that if it was not in their conscious mind, that they couldn't do anything about it. And alchemy had to go underground during the Catholic Inquisition. These people were thought of as witches and they were being burned at the stake. So a lot of the Hermetic worldview and a lot of the things that we now consider to be metaphysical were being lived out in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th centuries by the alchemists. And they said they were searching for gold, but it was not the common gold. So they weren't looking for money. They were looking for gold, which they considered to be an open and loving heart. So you can't do this work alone. And now that there are 2 planets in Aquarius, Jupiter and Saturn are in Aquarius, and in a few years, 2.5 years, I believe, Pluto will be going into Aquarius. So what is Aquarius about? Aquarius is about being best friends. Best friends can sit and talk things out and talk to each other and learn about each other's shadow without judgment and help each other be in more integrity with themselves. If you're not afraid of your partner, they can become your best friend where you have nothing to lose. You are being yourself. You're talking about what you're learning, how you're growing. You're learning about your shadow. Are they interested in doing this? And get a dialogue going about yourself and how you feel about learning about your inner world and your inner unconscious. And it's psychological, it's analytical. That's why it's called analytical psychology. You have to analyze, you have to look at things, you have to be willing to be open and honest with yourself. And again, nobody does that overnight. But the goal of all of this is becoming best friends in the age of Aquarius. And the goal is liberation, because liberation from our own unconscious and delusional beliefs that someone outside of us will change what we're experiencing. We change inside, and then the outer world changes outside. It's an inside out job, not the other way around. And if both people are willing to do some inner work, and it takes a lot of courage, it does, it takes a lot of courage to do shadow work, then we can rewrite our story. Because as I said, the first half of life is fated by our family of origin, by our experiences and that particular time and place. But our second half of life, there is grace. There is forgiveness for what we put ourselves through. There's forgiveness of the other person and what we experienced. And we can start again. We can start all over again. And that is how we change our life, by making new decisions that help us evolve. And in that way, we are also contributing to the evolution of the whole cosmos. And so that is my discussion for this evening. So thank you for coming to hear me, and whoever comes to hear me later, if you have any questions or you want to write to me, you can email me at rebecae@shadowdance.com.